A personal injury case is so serious because the injury itself is physical. It's something that affects your whole being. And we all know that even a simple toothache can destabilize your whole day or your whole life. You need an attorney when you get involved in either in an accident or you got injured because you need someone who will be the one to advocate for you. You will be blindsided by the insurance company because all their bottom line is to save their company money, and you wouldn't even know what your case is worth. I have personally been involved in 3 auto accidents. In one of them, I thought I was going to die. So I know what it feels like to go through the trauma of injuries, accident, and pain. So we represent our client coming from that angle. We treat them as individuals, not just a number, not just a commodity. We walk with them through their journey of pain, recovery, justice, and restoration. If you've been injured in an accident and you need a good attorney to represent you, you need to call the Olawale law firm. We understand you. We'll walk with you through your pain and we'll get you the fair compensation that you need. Welcome to this episode of Legal Angle with Emmanuel, the law Olawale. I have a wonderful guest with me today. This is not his first time on Legal Angle because he's been on the show before, so he's family. His name is Troy Doucet. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me again. It's great to be
Yeah,
here. I appreciate it.
yeah.
Nice video, by the way, too. I like it. Very professionally shot. Very done.
Oh,
Well done.
thank you.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about autism today, and that's because just recently, Troy posted on his social media about his own discovery that he has autism, and we want to him to educate us about autism, what it's been like living with autism, and what it's been like as a lawyer with autism. Hopefully, before the end of this show, we'll get more educated about autism. So, Troy, can you tell us a bit more about yourself?
Yeah. As you know, I'm a lawyer as well. I practice in consumer protection, do a lot of foreclosure defense. I'm married. My wife and I live in Hilliard. We've got 2 daughters. I have 3 daughters total, teenager and 2 young ones, a toddler and a baby that's, well, I guess she's whatever it is, 10 months, whatever they're called. I've lived in Columbus for about 25 years or so, and my practice has been open since 2010. I did have a different a business before, or different profession before I became a lawyer. I was a mortgage broker. I owned a mortgage company, and that collapsed in 2005, and I ended up going through bankruptcy and foreclosure, and that prompted me to reevaluate what I was doing for his profession and decided to go back to school. I had to finish my undergraduate degree, finish that, and then went into law school and basically used the knowledge and understanding that I had both as a mortgage broker, but also as somebody who was going through foreclosure, fighting it pro se, to focus my practice area on that. And when I opened my firm in 2010, the end of 2010, it was all about foreclosure defense and consumer. At this point, we're more of a, I call us a more of a litigation boutique, especially coming out of COVID. We've picked up a lot more business to business related cases, but my skill set's always been in the litigation realm, so that's what I focus on.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
And can you tell us a little bit more about your home life growing up?
Yeah, my father's military, so I moved around all my life. I ended up in Centerville for high school, so I graduated in '97, Centerville High School at near Dayton, and then came to Columbus for OSU and stuck around. Other than a brief time period in 1 year, I was in Miami, Florida, which was terrific. But other than that 1 year, I've been in Columbus. My growing up, moving around is really difficult, and this somewhat comes into play of autism and our discussion with that. But I also was bullied quite a bit, I didn't understand social interactions the way other people would naturally understand them. So throughout my life, I've focused on learning interactions through watching other people. I didn't really speak until I was 3.5 years old. My parents put me in speech therapy about 3.5 because I wasn't speaking, which is actually rather typical of some folks that have autism that are autistic. It's especially at the what's considered high functioning. We don't really use that term anymore. But there's a subgroup of autistic folks that develop language skills later, which I was one of them. And then, so I learned by either watching people being taught or a whole lot of trial and error. And that's where you can get into trouble with other people, is because you might mean well, and I always have, um, and you sort of have a truth as the underlying stream of everything you do, but the meaning well and the truth don't really help you out in every kind of situation if the words that you use to describe whatever you're feeling or whatever is around you aren't really taken real well. So as an adult, if I mess that up with somebody who's not a personal friend of mine, they generally they generally distance themselves from me. But as a child, you have a very direct path of feedback, and that is through other kids that are not afraid to tell you how different you are, or how you're not really fitting in, and that's how you get into bullying and that you're just different. So I've always been a bit different. I've always had my special interests, which is typical of autism. Also, we could talk about that. However, whatever direction you want to go. You asked about my childhood, so I hope
Yeah,
that answers
thank you.
the baseline for you.
Yeah. So growing up as a child with autism, what was it like making friends and navigating childhood relationships?
Well, I found out when I was turning right before I turned 43 years old that I'm autistic. So I didn't have an understanding of what I do now, even a short time after that. Even really since the beginning of this year, it's May 2020, May 19th, 2022. I mean, December 19th, 2021, I didn't, this wasn't even on my radar. It's just sort of a flux of things that happened. So I don't really think of when I was going through childhood, I didn't really think about that in terms of autism or not. It was more of, um, hey, I am different and I know that I'm different and I'm reminded a lot that I'm different, but I really don't know why. And I don't know why other kids aren't really seeing what I see, or why they're not understanding what the future repercussions of the current actions are. I've always sort of, in terms of mechanical events, um, and sometimes I'd see things, and for me it was, why can't you all see this? And then I would say it and people would write me off, and then all of a sudden that would happen and I'd be right, and then kids would come back to me like, okay, well, you know, sort of surprised, and that's usually how I ended up making friends or being more involved with my contemporaries at the time. Was that it wasn't necessarily right out the chute a natural, but I sort of had to prove myself as worthy, or prove myself as having some ability or something that was a little bit beyond what they were what they were understanding, and there was a respect there. So I suppose my friendships have always been a level of respect, or people just look past my differences. I've got friends that still do that, and they're good friends of mine, and I had friends that are growing up like that. So I don't want to discount those kind of relationships that I had, because I've had some terrific friends over the years. But for the most part, that's how life has been like for me as a kid.
Yeah. And so people look at you more as a sage of the same age, and you just have to deal with that. Uh, and can you tell us how you found out that you're autistic?
Yeah, yeah, and you know, I have to say, for me, it's always, my selling point is never been about the sales. It's always been about the knowledge. So that's how and this is also can be typical of some autistic people is that you just you gather so much, you have so much knowledge, you dive so deep into something that naturally people come to you for those problems. Like for me, litigation, I'm good at that, so I naturally have people come to me for that. Um, the how I found out, to answer your question, I was coming out of COVID. My business took a big hit. We took a huge hit here because of foreclosure defense. The moratorium was good for society, the economy, and that all was put into place. But for me, it was distressing, and I was a bit depressed, and I wanted to see if I could get somebody who could help me work through some of my feelings. I've seen therapists in the past, and I started poking around quite a bit and found and wasn't really connecting with anybody. And then one morning I woke up and I said, well, how about maybe you're autistic? And it just was a flighting kind of thought. It wasn't anything that like bells and whistles. And I write about this in one of my posts on LinkedIn as well. But um, I I didn't really give it too much thought at the time, but it grated on me for a few days, and I ended up taking some online tests. I took one; it said I had markers for it. So I took another, took a few, and they all said I had markers. So at that point, I decided to see a professional about it, and got hooked up with somebody here in town who does a lot of work with the autistic community, a therapist, a doctor, a psychologist who does a lot of work, and then we went through the whole process, which is rather lengthy. I did have somebody, a therapist, about 15 years ago, plus or minus, I don't remember how long ago it was, suggest during a conversation that I could be autistic, and I was actually pretty offended. Never went back to see him again because I was really offended by it, um, and I actually did some minor tests back then, and through somebody, and it said no, so I sort of forgot about it. But this time around, as I decided to see somebody and start looking into it, I also did a lot of research online about it, learned what, especially adults who are later diagnosed. And as I'm reading everything, it's like, oh gosh, this is totally me. This is me. Okay, this is me too. Yeah, here I am again, in these examples of people. And in order to get diagnosed, you actually have to have had it your whole life. So as a child moving on. So part of the diagnosis process for adults is somebody who knew you back then, usually a parent, is interviewed. And for me, it was my mom. And I was in the room with her. I mean, we were all together and talking about it. And the things that I did when I was young all matched up to quite a bit. In fact, my scores for that time of my life are even higher than they are now, because I've had a life being able to live with it and mask. It's called masking, how I am or how I think, because it might be unusual or uncomfortable for other people. So you learn to deal with it. So that's how it came about. A long way to talking about it, but and I'm
You
happy. I'm
mentioned,
thrilled about it, and I do want to say that too. I'm absolutely thrilled. People could say congratulations for being autistic, and I'd be really appreciative, because for me, that's what this has been like for me.
great. You mentioned that the first time that someone pointed that out to you was years ago, and you're
Yeah,
quite offended.
yeah.
Why were you offended? And what changed between that time to now that you embrace it?
Well, I think a couple of things. One, I think that there's more understanding out there about it. Things are really different today than they were 10 or 15 years ago. And I think that's one of the reasons why I've been open about it in social media, and why I'm happy to do these kind of interviews, is because I think a lot of people have a typical picture of what autism looks like. And I think I did as well. And I thought to myself, well, I don't rock in a chair by myself, kind of thing. And nonverbal, or people always refer back to Rain Man, and and that's not me. I'm able to communicate. I'm a smart person, figure things out. In looking back, but I did still go and see somebody, because I was open to it. But there's so much progression, especially with understanding what adult autism is like. And there's a functionality of taking questions literally, which I will talk about if you want me to. But to finish off my offensiveness, what I thinking back now, what I realize about it is that it wasn't about this typical stereotypical thing that we think of autism, but rather for my therapist, who's actually pretty good at thinking back about it, is that it was the what I was coming to him for. Like I didn't have a technical um, I wasn't clinically depressed or clinically anxious, but I was seeing him. I was at the beginning. That's why you start seeing somebody, but you sort of work through things. It was because I was seeing him to figure out the world. Like I was going in and I was saying, okay, I have this thing going on with these friends, or oh God, dating. Oh God, we're not even gonna get into that. How does that work? Like, how do people interact with each other? What should I be doing in this situation? Like, how does this, how, and he would have to explain the world to me. And I think he saw through that eventually after doing this for, I don't know, for a while, that, I'm missing a piece of the pie that's pretty typical of people that are autistic. I always thought of it as, well, I moved around all my life, so I, um, I was stunted by my inexperience of finding friends, or because I was bullied, I had this social learning period that was taken from me. And because I didn't have that, well, I'm just making up for that. I didn't think of it in terms of, okay, that stuff happened really because there's this big thing in the background that I just wasn't aware of till recently. And
Okay.
by the way, one thing
It,
that I can do is just talk and not realize when I should stop talking. So let me know if you want me to switch off or talk about something else, or if this is too much information.
no, it's not too much information. You're doing great and learning a lot, and I hope
Cool.
our audience are also doing the same. You mentioned masking. A couple of years ago, I read a book called "Look Me in the Eye." It's the story of just a man like you too that was diagnosed later in life. He's been living and growing up with autism without knowing. And one of the things he mentioned is similar to what you just said, like growing up with kids who take things literally. You say things, people get offended. He has to learn how to respond, especially to some kind of emotional things, because he was more mechanical than emotional. So he had to learn and mask some of those emotions. Did you also experience the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, I still do. Uh, it's fascinating. So I'll give you an example. It was just this morning, and I did it. And I didn't even realize it. So I had this post I did on LinkedIn talking about how all my life I have been in when I've been in environments where there's a lot of chaos, a lot of noise, a lot of chaos, that I have to actually remove myself from the room and go into a bathroom and just chill out for 5 minutes, just to be able to center myself because my it's sensory overload. And I've had all my life also ringing in my ears, and I always thought it was normal. I never really thought to do anything that it was even something. And then with this, the past few months as I've been reading, I realized, okay, this is a functionality of autism, is that you've got overload sensory experiences. And for me, it's my left ear that even when I talk a little bit loudly or listen or something moderately loud, my ear will crackle the way a speaker will when you turn it up real loud and it starts crackling. I have that a lot. So I realized that, and I tried this out, that if I put a little earplug in my ear, that I don't, that it helps. Like I don't have that sensory overload. My left ear, my right one, I guess, is not as good hearing as my left. Interestingly, I did a hearing test a couple of years ago. I thought I was losing my hearing, and I went and did a hearing test, and the guy doing my test said that I had such good hearing that I was like, "What's that noise?" I could actually hear the machine. Like I was listening, I could hear the static from the machine, but that's what it is. But the downside of that is that it becomes just overwhelming. I bring that all up because in my post this morning, I talked about this and I said, oh, what I do is I get a neutral color, cheap foam earplug. I cut it in half. I stick it in my ear, and nobody can tell if I am if I have it in. And I got some posts from people who are in the community saying, "Troy, you don't have to apologize for that." Like I was explaining how I mask my hearing issue, my sensory overload issue. And I didn't even realize until somebody said that. Oh my gosh, because what I was saying, I'm asking because I'm hiding it. I have an issue with this ear, and rather than say, "Hey, everybody, I have an issue with this ear," or put an earplug in, and everybody see I have an earplug, I'm shoving it in there so nobody knows. So I'm sort of masking. Now, for me, I I recognize that now, and I can say, "Okay," but I'm still gonna do it because not everybody's gonna know I'm autistic, and I'm offended if people walk around sometimes they got the earphones in, and I don't think they're paying attention. So, and I need the feedback. I need a feedback loop to know where I'm going. So, I'll probably still do it just because I don't want somebody thinking I'm not listening to them. In a sense, that's masking, but also in a sense, it's like, okay, I'm being respectful of the people around me just as I'd want them to be respectful of me. But that's a simple example of masking. But it happens in all layers of everything. If I'm in a trial at court, and I don't have the option to say, okay, judge, give me a half an hour, let me just go relax. You just have to sort of push through whatever it is. Uh, but
So how do you think, well, let me just ask directly, how does autism affect you as an attorney?
I knew this question was coming, and I've been thinking about how to answer it. I am very frustrated with the legal process as somebody with autism, and it's probably not how you're thinking. Maybe people would think, well, there are autistic folks out there that are in the system that have a difficult time, which is true. I I I very well have, I'm sure, represented people who are autistic that maybe don't know themselves, but I don't really work on that side. What I work from is, as a lawyer, it's very frustrating to me, even more so, I think, than some of my colleagues, because my whole world and construct is based upon a set of rules. And the rules have to be honest in order to work. So this is my life, not even thinking about the law. So because I don't understand social interactions as well, I have had to learn everything, right? In learning it, what happens is I take the lesson and I put it into my construct. And next time I have a situation, I have to think back to my construct. Okay, how do I respond to this? What's the output? So input into my construct and then output based on my learned experience. In order for that learned experience to be able to have accurate output, the construct has to be based upon a set of rules that apply to everybody and apply in all situations. And really, that comes down to honesty. Um, so for so it makes me very honest. Sometimes people don't believe I'm honest, but I'm incredibly honest all the time because I don't I don't really know how not to be, and it doesn't really, it's never benefited me, and it'd be too complicated to create a big old lie. So it's this contract. So then what you do is you take law school, and I learn all these new laws. Learn all these new rules. I did well in law school. I enjoyed it. This is my special interest. I love the law. I've always loved the law. And I have this new construct that says, okay, in this situation, this input, this fact, this rule, this conclusion. And as you know, as a somebody who's in front of the courts all the time, your decisions that you get from judges aren't exactly like that, and that's what I mean by frustrated, is that I will input certain facts or I will address certain legal issues, and and because I've addressed those or brought them up, I expect that the law is, I know what the law is, I've been able to cite it, I can find it, that the output is what I'm expecting. And what I've found over time is that what becomes a little bit overriding, or this is my perspective, is that the outcome matters. And we all know that it matters because everybody says bad facts make bad law, right? I mean, we all know that. There's a lot of emotion injected into the court system and the judiciary to where the output isn't exactly in line with what these inputs are. And and I know we all live with it, but for me, it's not just a problem from why aren't you doing this, but this is rather, this is who I am. Like, this is my being is based on these rules, based on this honest construct of the rules. And if like what I'm addressing in my emotions isn't even included in the decision, or it's just ignored because you have to ignore it in order to get the result, then it bothers me immensely. So I loved litigation my first few years in practice, and got into it. And then I got all these decisions, and I would appeal absolutely everything. I have dozens of appeals to my name, and I'd lose even some of these appeals. I'm like, what is going on? And then like 5 years later, a decision comes out. This is for my practice. It's this case out of the 10th district. And it says, okay, these bunch of cases that we ruled this way on, we were totally wrong. And it's the opposite. We got all those. And then I look at the cases and they're mine. It's like I got 4 out of the 6 that are cited are my cases, and the appellate court saying we got those things all wrong. I'm like, I know you got them wrong. I've been telling you this for years now. So there's only so much really you can take of that, I think, as a lawyer. So for me, how has it impacted me? It's pushed me away from the practice, quite frankly, to be quite honest with you.
And yeah, from what you're telling me, you seem to be the kind of guy that sees things that other lawyers or judges wouldn't see. And that can be very frustrating, especially dealing with the legal system. Like you said, you write all these briefs, you make all these arguments. They couldn't see it at the time, but you could see way beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to seem like I'm smarter than other folks per se. I mean,
Or
I
you don't want to admit it, Troy, you're smart. I can
I
say that.
I just, maybe this is,
Yeah, just be modest.
I just have more experience with it. It's more of my life. I can dive into these details because I've got the time, and I've got the interest, and a little bit of the ability to do that. So that's what. But yeah, I do bring these things up. I'm like, okay, why am I getting a one paragraph, decision? And I'm sure they're thinking to themselves, why the hell is this guy sending, give me all this crap? Like, get to the point, man. Or it's, well, wait a second, your client's not paying their mortgage. Why am I even bothering with all this stuff? And for me, it's like the value of the judicial process is not the outcome. It's the process. It's the equal application of the process to everybody before the law, no matter who they are or what they are, rich, poor, black, white, disabled, whatever it is, everybody is supposed to be equal in the process, because the process is what makes sure that the outcome is fair. Not maybe 100% of the time, but we've set up the process to be overarching fair. So even when the decision is not the way we expect, it's still fair because the process has been honored. And that's what I'm sort of getting at with that.
Yeah. So you're more about honoring the process, applying the law equally to everybody, regardless of what it is. Okay.
Yeah. And I would say one other thing is that, when you get into a lot of lawyers, I've seen it in the ABA magazine or ABA journal last year, a couple of years ago. Somebody wrote in and said, I really appreciate this article about the judges, and how they always want, the most valuable thing about a judge is to make sure they get the decision right. It's like, no, that is not. Because what happens is you get the subjective life experience of that particular judge that is making a decision subjectively based on their own life experiences to come to a resolution that they think is fair. But you and I both know that if you didn't grow up the way that judge did, or you're living off in suburbia in your McMansion, and everybody has health care, and everybody is at the country club, you're not really going to understand what somebody else somewhere else is living, or somebody else living a different life. And that's the problem with this, get the fair result. You got to look at the process before you look at the result.
Thank you. And how has autism affected your relationships?
You have to be more specific.
Okay. I'm not talking about your marriage right now. We can get there, but I wouldn't want to go there. About relationships with, let's say, friends, colleagues, acquaintances.
Yeah, I mean, and I mean, my wife and I have a very good relationship. We've come to a point where when she found out, she was like, okay, so what else? What's new? And it doesn't change you. It doesn't change necessarily who you are. It just gives you perspective for your life and gives you additional um, understanding. So from my friendships have one of the things all autistics say is that they long for really close friends. Like it's not that we don't want friends. It's just that it doesn't seem to really work out real well to have real deep personal
Connection.
friendships. So everything is sort of topical. It's business to some degree. I have a couple friends that I um, I'm very good friends with. I like them a lot. I think they like me a lot, and we can talk and joke about everything. When I called them up and said, "Hey, I'm autistic," they were berating me on how shocked they were, and as it being joking, they were joked with me quite a bit, and we had a lot of fun with it. But at the same time, like my brain does work really differently, so so it's hard sometimes to communicate on certain levels, and usually those are friendship related levels, right? They're the social things that I'd run into trouble with. So they're things that I don't understand. I'll give you an example. Tailgating. Like, I don't understand it. I don't understand what the point is of going down and sitting in a car trunk and drinking beer before. I don't get it. What's the point? But that's just me, and I know a lot of people love that, and that's really important to them, and good for you. And I don't mean to talk badly about your experience with that or how you feel about it, but I just don't get it. So I don't. So whatever, if you do that and you think to yourself, okay, well, this is why I love it. Troy doesn't have that. Like, that piece is not even there. Like, I don't even have a playbook for it. Like, if I were to do it, now I can go. My wife's enjoyed tailgating. She's neurotypical, and I'll go down with her and chit chat and small chat, and I'm good at that. But there's that. It's topical, even in organizations or business or organizations in particular. Like, I tend not to say anything as much as I'm talking a lot to you. We can talk a lot about subjects we know, but I don't really talk outside of what I know. So I can go into organizations and I'm rather quiet. I'm pensive. I think about things, but and then I'll only speak when I really know about something. But then once I figure it out, I'm like, okay, here's some things that we really need to work on in this organization. And then all of a sudden, I'm not as people aren't as crazy about me because not that I'm obnoxious or mean about it, but I'm not I'm not understanding the social norms for how to go about to communicate this particular type of improvement would be beneficial for everybody, or for how I perceived it a lot, at least. And when you get somebody like that, you've almost got to have somebody like me to talk to me, because my style of communication is going to be different, and all that impacts friendships, relationships with other people. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I have a business
So
partner that's been with me for 5 years, and I think he's put up with me, through all this, and it's been a huge learning process for me, and I think for him, but he's got a lot of patience is the main key with him. He has a lot of patience for me, and I appreciate that, Andy. Thank you if you're listening. I appreciate that.
thank you.
We
So
have a good
people see you as very direct, and being direct can be offensive to people. I experience that sometimes too.
Yeah, I mean, and I work on that. Like, I work on that's masking, another way of masking. Like, I know that, so I am cautious, and when before I send text, I think about my text a couple times. Like, I stop trying to joke over text. Like, I can joke in person, and everybody knows I'm being light. Sometimes doesn't come across that way in a text. I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I should. You look at it a couple hours later, and you're like, yeah, maybe that was a little bit. I wasn't as funny as I thought it was. Um, just from a harmless way, but nevertheless, it wasn't a funny thing that I sent over. But yeah, directness is a is a key functionality to things. I mean
Do
well.
you, well, you do. You do. It's just sometimes people can't understand why. And people will say the same thing, but just indirect ways, like the social norm. And when you're a direct person, it becomes offensive.
Yeah.
Do you experience social anxiety?
Not particularly. No, that's a good question. No, I mean, I ran for office. I enjoy doing it immensely. It was great. Um, but I didn't go into a room like with anxiety over going into a room. I've also lived with this my whole life, so I think I've been able to cope with a lot of things. Do I have social anxiety in that standpoint? No. Do I have a social anxiety that people will not like me? Not really. Do I have, what hurts? So I'm pretty immune to a lot of things. What can hurt me personally, and I don't know if I should say this out loud. Well, nobody's going to be able to replicate it. I don't imagine. But what matters to me is close friends who who think poorly of me, or if I offend somebody that I value their opinion a lot, that I like and that I value who they are and what their opinion is. If I were to do something to offend them, that would impact me emotionally, negatively. That's why I say can't really replicate it, because you have to become my friend before you can make me feel bad. So, but that's where I get into things. But I'll still make sure I'll read emails a couple times before I send them. I read my text a couple times because I don't want to offend people I just met. I went to lunch with another lawyer here in town who's autistic. They're not open about it. They just got their diagnosis last year. And I'll be as vague as possible about them for their privacy. But it was a great conversation. But both of us were talking about afterwards how we were looking at read our text a couple times, and we were sort of fishing with the other person to see if we did something at lunch that offended the other person. Like that's where our brain goes, is, have I offended you? And can we still be friends, or can we be friends? And you're looking for cues all the time from somebody else. I make a point, everybody that I meet and or that I feel like maybe isn't sure how things went, or doesn't feel, that appears a little bit anxious, or appears a little unusual, I try to always contact them after a meeting and say, "Hey, it was great to meet you," just so that they can feel better about the meeting. For somebody who's autistic, it's even more important because we don't have the social cues to understand, was this a good meeting or not? Did I do a good job? So I'm benefit from a feedback loop all the time from whoever I'm dealing with. And that's played into my business. I have employees, and way, I am with my employees today is night and day compared to even 7 years ago or 8 years ago, because I didn't realize all this, and I had to work on all of it. It was a huge learning curve for me. And I think I'm doing pretty well today based on how my staff interacts with me, and happy, but it's a learned skill.
Yeah, thank you.
It's a learned
Yeah,
skill, especially on the direct side. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna ask you about that, but since you touched on it, so I was gonna ask you, how was your interaction with, with the people you lead, as as the owner of a law firm, dealing with or living with autism without knowing? What was it like?
Well, I have to say, if I weren't autistic, I'd probably be so embarrassed I wouldn't talk about it, quite frankly. But I will honestly say I was not a very good boss. I wasn't mean to people, but I wasn't. I was so focused on the job and getting a good job done that was what I assumed everybody else cared about too. Like, I assumed everybody came in and did the job for the sake of doing a great job, and that was it. And why am I addressing the same issue in a memo 4 times? We've talked about this, and that's when I get a little bit more direct, and like, this needs to be fixed. So I'm not running around with my hair on fire or yelling at people or anything like that, but rather I didn't realize that there was maybe the way to say this is an emotional or a social aspect of managing a business. And I learned that after I got some negative feedback. Somebody gave me some very negative feedback, and I took it to heart because I need it. I'm a literal person. I need somebody to be like, "Troy, you're a dick. Like, do something different," And somebody didn't say that word to me, but they got the point across, and I started learning about it. And I put my special interest hat on, my focus, my interest in fixing that. So I read a lot, I learned a lot. Then I started trying things, and I everything I did, I came back to, okay, how can I do this to make the life better for my staff, for my team? And it's come up with a list, and it's one of my social posts as well. It's 29 different things that I know to do now that I didn't know 5 or 10 years ago to do that create a better environment for the people that work for me. Saying hi to everybody in the morning. I have that on my checklist. It's something silly, but I check it off a box every morning because that's what I need. Maybe that's a little sad to say. I mean, that somebody has to do that, but I think of it as just part of my life. It's a realism, and that's why said just a moment ago, somebody else would be embarrassed. I don't think of it as embarrassed or not. It's just me. It's what I need in order to for the people around me to thrive. Is I need something else, and that helps them benefit from my strengths. That might be a weakness, and I work on my weakness, but I have great strengths, especially with the law world, with litigation. So I can direct people where they might not have otherwise thought to look. And but it's that balance. I'll take that one step further, and even as I'm out there in the autistic community and listening to other people who are autistic talk about acceptance and masking and how they don't like to mask, and how masking isn't good because it's not. We should all be who we want to be. But in reality, once you get into management, I almost was completely unmasked at the beginning of my management career. I didn't know the difference. I didn't know what it was or what the difference was, but I wasn't making an effort to sugarcoat anything. And now, I always say something positive before I make any kind of suggestion for anything. I point out even the smallest things that I can think of that somebody does as a positive because it is. It's a really good thing that they've done, that they've put energy into making a positive difference, even if it's a small way. And me, I should acknowledge that. And I think we can all benefit from that. That's another reason why I put it out online and on social media, is because as much as my posts benefit other people who are autistic or interested in learning about autism, I think it benefits society also, right? All of us can say hi to each other, and all of us can smile on the way through the hall. Sometimes it's not easy for people who are autistic if they're having overwhelm, but that's something that's good for everybody, and that's why I put it out there.
Thank you. Do you wish you found out earlier?
Man, you're asking me the hard questions. That's a hard question. Pluses and minuses. I mean, in certain situations, yeah, I wish I knew, but in certain situations, no, I don't think I would have. I think it's really situation dependent. Um, and yeah, I mean, in school, um, I probably would have had an IEP, quite frankly, and individualized, what's it, education
Educational
plan.
plan?
Yeah,
Hmm.
and maybe I would have done differently, but in other situations, if I knew, I don't know, would people have treated me different? And would I have acted differently? And would my life have led where it was? I don't know. I mean, I used to say to I even remember saying when I was coming out of the bullying years, a couple years after, I wouldn't wish my existence as I had experienced it on even my enemies. I don't really have a lot of enemies, not in my nature either, but at least I don't feel that way. I know some people don't like me very much, but I don't know why. But as far as I'm concerned, enemy, it's like I wouldn't really wish this on them because it was so hard. So in that perspective, yes. But would I be where I am today and doing what I am? I don't know. Um, I don't know.
Do you believe your autism has helped you to a certain extent to be where you are right now?
This moment, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I am incredibly thankful for it. I am incredibly relieved. I if I had known this a couple of years earlier, that would have been awesome. I would say, I don't know, maybe I don't know. I got other things that I think about. But right now, it's awesome for me. You can say congratulations, you're autistic, and I would be thrilled because really, it not only does it put everything in perspective for me, and it says, okay, this stuff makes sense, but it also gives me some sense of a little bit of identity almost, where like I'm not this person that has problem after problem. I'm just somebody whose brain is wired differently, and I can be a lot more okay with that than thinking that I'm always making a mistake, or I still have to play this game where I'm feeling like I'm a mistake. And you know what? Me telling you and telling other of my colleagues and everybody else that in the world at this point, I mean, how that post went around the world, but is that people can understand me and give me a little bit more breathing room sometimes, knowing that I'm not trying to be obnoxious or be mean. I don't know. I'm being a little bit different. I'm smart. I figured it out. I mean, I can tell you what the answer is. Don't worry so much about how I package it. Give me a little slack with that. So I'm hoping that yields some benefits, but time will tell.
Yeah. It does, you've been hoping about it, for people that are closer to you or that have dealt with you in the past. Even for those who think that maybe you have offended them, saying that it can look back and be like, oh my God, it wasn't intentional. So it could even lead to mending broken relationships.
Possibly,
Now, I
yes.
don't know if any of that has happened. Has anyone reached out to you from the past to say, well, I misjudged you?
No, nobody's really done that. But I've had some people that reach out to me saying I was really nice to them growing up. They really appreciated that, and that meant a lot to me to see some of those, and it means a lot to me too that I've got a lot of people who have direct messages me and said, um, I wasn't sure about. I've had these markers, these feelings for a while, but your post has given me the extra push that I needed to go out and see a professional to actually get tested for it, or people whose family members are autistic. One person who they're going to be marrying is autistic or suspects of getting tested for it, and the new spouse wants to understand a little bit more about it, and I'm happy to respond to everybody and as I can and give them that extra level of understanding that they need. My goal ultimately with all this is to have the world be a little bit more accepting and to normalize autism for everybody else. Like even how I felt 15 years ago, the opposite. It's not that like that. There are a lot of variations of autism, a lot of variations of people, and that's okay. We're allowed to. We think a little bit differently, but we're gonna have some pluses, we're gonna have some minuses. That's like everybody in the universe. Ours just happen to be a little bit different. But and and that's why one of the things I now say and I put out there is you assume everybody has an invisible disability, assume everybody has something wrong, and treat everybody nicely, and you'll probably have a happier life for it yourself. You know, idea,
Exactly.
just an idea.
Exactly. And how has your wife adjusted to your diagnosis?
Well, again, she was incredibly supportive, um, uh, and and she continues to be incredibly supportive. Again, I don't really change as a person. You're just injecting a level of knowledge and understanding about something. So if she knows like I can have a sensory overload with something, and that if I need just a moment to back off and go, that makes perfect sense. There's nothing she's doing wrong, that. But that's masking, man. That's what I'm always thinking is, okay, how am I presenting this to where the other person doesn't think badly or get offended or think it's them or think badly because I am doing something that is out of the ordinary that their other friends don't do with them. So, but now that we have a greater understanding, I think it's been really positive. She's a terrific woman, all the way around, terrific, understanding woman. If she's listening, I love you very much.
Oh, wow, that's so sweet. And
I do.
there are some
And
people
my
that might be,
girls too. Sorry.
yeah, oh, great. There are
Yeah.
some people that might be watching this right now and may not even understand what autism is. Can you try to explain to them what autism is?
Sure. So autism is effectively, for most people, it's it is a social or executive function. Um, uh, how do I say this? Negative impact or missing piece as far as the ability to communicate with other people in some way. When people talk about there's an autism spectrum, it's not a gradient. So like not everybody is autistic. Like some people say everybody's a little bit on the spectrum. No, they're not. You're either on the spectrum or you're not. The spectrum itself deals more with um, different aspects of your brain's functionality. So some people, if you break it into like 7 different areas, from being able to speak, not verbal, nonverbal, having particular um, way you stimulate yourself, tics kind of thing, or that's a function of it. Other types of I can give you a link that explains this really well to an article that explains real well. But some people on the spectrum will have like items 1, 2, and 6 and 7. Others will have 3, 4, and 5. So everybody's a little bit different. So there's a saying that if you meet one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. Everybody is different. I have my particular interest. I know there's another lawyer in Florida. She really has her interest. She's open about it. She has an interest in ice skating facts, and she can tell you just about anything about any ice skater Olympic ice skater there is out there. So in that sense, we're a little bit different. Some people talk about how they have issues driving. I don't have an issue driving. Some people talk about how they have coordination related issues. That's not really me either, but I'm pretty strong on the social side. So there's a lot to it, but suffice it to say, it's a fundamental, broad based impact on your life in order for it to arise to autism. So if somebody is deprived, if somebody has sensory issues, but that's it, they've got sensory issues, right? Somebody has anxiety and that's it, then they have an anxiety disorder. You package a bunch of things together and you can end up with a autism diagnosis. It can be harder to get diagnosis when you're older than when you're younger because we've gone through so much of life sort of masking. And when you get into literal responses and whatnot, that can even become even more difficult. I hope that explains it. It almost be like sometimes people have got to go and search it. I do recommend everybody take a test, even if you don't think you're autistic or not. It's fascinating. You might be surprised on what you learn about yourself. There's a lot of free ones online that you just Google autism self-test free. You don't even have to put your name or information in there. Just answer some questions and you might be surprised in what you learn.
Thank you. Is it considered a disability?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's a recognized disability, ADA disability. Yeah, sure is.
Since you been public with it, what has it been like? What kind of support have you received?
Well, I haven't had so many people say nice things to me, I think, in all my life. There's been a lot of positive feedback. I appreciate it, and like I said, what's been really cool is to be making a little bit of an impact in other people's life through it. I've always said that I want to do as much good as I can while I'm on this planet, and I've funneled all that energy into law and helping people stay in their homes and foreclosure defense. But this has been really neat for me, and my first post did get a lot of views and people really a lot of great comments, and they were all tremendous. And even people who were in the community, their support and welcoming me into it and say, and welcome. And even if even if as I've been done additional posts to even see those responses, like, yeah, this happens to me too. I'm autistic and this is what I experience. It's just fascinating to see. But I have got nothing but positive responses from people, and I'm incredibly appreciative and really happy with it. I haven't got as much feedback from Central Ohio, I would say, but there are incredibly strong communities around the world. UK, Australia, they have all kinds of recognition and support for it. I mean, here we're thinking of Rain Man, and they're talking about, how to how to sell your products more as an autistic business owner kind of thing. It's really, really been interesting on that front. I think we have a lot of education to go in the United States, certainly in Ohio. Um, and if I can play a small part in that, I'll be happy.
Oh, great. What advice will you have for parents like your parents that has a kid or kids like you? What advice will you have for them? What would you have wanted them to do?
Take a deep breath. Take a deep breath and relax. Your child is going to be perfectly fine. They're going to grow up a little bit thinking differently, but they're going to be just fine. Don't try to mold them into something that they're not. The reason why people are called neurodiverse is because they're actually neurodiverse, which is autism, ADHD, dyslexia, that kind of thing. You don't try to make somebody into a neurotypical kid, because it's not gonna be there, and they're gonna get even more frustrated at it. You're gonna have special interests that they're engaged with. It could be anything under the sun, from the law to ice skating to dinosaurs to whatever it is, and let them roll with it. I would say, don't hold them back from learning. You might actually find that they develop their skills a little bit better that way, where they are learning not only about something, but learning about something on a deep level, learning how to communicate with other people about it, neurotypical kids as well as neurodiverse, if they're in different schools or programs, that they're going to understand, they're going to get a real good sense over time what where their communication boundaries are. So there's actually a lot of benefits to letting somebody do that. They're going to expand their mind a little bit, and you might even find special interests. This has been my case over my life, is that once I sort of master something, I move on to something else, and so they've always been safe topics, safe kinds of things. So let them go with it. Having a helping hand, understand that we're all very literal. So if you say clean up your room, they mightn't be like, "Well, my room's perfectly clean to me." Do you mean vacuum? Do you mean dust? Do you mean put away my socks? Do you mean make my bed? Do you mean rearrange? Like, what exactly do you want from me, Mom? And that can always be helpful too. Lists are good. If you have a few things you want us to do, maybe make a little list and be very specific on it. But for the most part, don't worry about it. They're going to grow up just fine. They're going to find their own way. They're going to learn a lot about the world around them. Some things will be easier, some things will be harder, and all that's perfectly fine.
Thank you. Let me ask you this. What does it mean to you to come on this show, Legal Handle, to educate the public about autism?
I really appreciate what you do, and I knew you do a lot of different shows, a lot of different topics. I've been on here before for consumer law last year. I really appreciate it. I think you do a good job of sharing with the public, with the world. Interesting, especially with legal aspects to it that allow people to learn more about themselves, about others. Even with the judges that you bring on, or judicial candidates, there's a lot of people I know out there that don't really know what that looks like and what that's like, and you provide them a behind the scenes view of it. So great job. Kudos to you. Keep doing what you're doing. I really appreciate it. I pop on and watch some of your shows as well with other folks, and great work.
Yeah. Thank you, Troy, and thank you for spending the last hour with me and the audience. It's been wonderful. I've learned more about autism within this hour than I have in a very long time. I really appreciate the time. I appreciate your honesty and your vulnerability.
Well, thanks for having me on, and thanks for your interest in this and helping spread the word. So very kind of you. Thank you. Anytime. Happy to help anytime.
Thank you. And for those of you who are watching us at home or listening to this podcast, we thank you for your time. Until next time, stay blessed. Bye for now.